Chapter 61. Access Code. Arg! Leroy cried out in pain. General Zephyr's fist with its white flames struck through Leroy's shoulders. Even his rubber ability couldn't withstand the cold flames. Chunks of the flesh from his shoulders splattered into the ceiling. Leroy leaped away from General Zephyr and shouted, "Ashen, you better get your ass here now." Whoosh! General Zephyr, with his hands raised, shot out the white flames at Leroy again. But as the white flames got near Leroy, a slit appeared out of the thin air. The slit opened sideways, revealing a dark opening within it. General Zephyr's white flames shot into the dark opening, unable to reach Leroy, as if it was shot into another dimension. SSS level dimensional ability? General Zephyr shouted at this realization. Leroy took this opportunity and ran. When he saw Ashen appear out of a dark opening, he cursed out at him. "I could have been killed," Leroy shouted. "Quiet. I was letting them in," Ashen said. Men and women started to stream into General Zephyr's living quarters. These men and women were in full armor and had the letter R on their left chest's armor plate. They were Edric Robertson's subordinates. One of the women came over to Leroy, and with her hands hovering over Leroy's shoulder, a white glow appeared. The white glow extended out and touched onto the wounds of Leroy's shoulder. His flesh twitched and it grew back. "Thanks, sweetie. You're definitely more helpful than that bastard," Leroy said as he glanced over at Ashen. "Shut up and focus," Ashen said. Edric Robertson's men aimed their weapons at General Zephyr. But before they could pull the trigger, General Zephyr gave out a huge roar. The white flames engulfing his body extended out and filled the area. Arg! The men were instantly vaporized and turned into stiff carbonized corpses. Ashen and Leroy escaped narrowly with them, leaping further away to the first security entrance. Beads of sweat appeared on General Zephyr's forehead. The white flames engulfing his body flickered as it became smaller. Using the white flames consumed more energy than blue flames that those who were at expert mastery wielded. He gritted his teeth as he saw more men streaming inside. "So that's how you want to do it," General Zephyr thought. "Come fight me like a man, you pussies," General Zephyr taunted as he held his hand behind his back. Ashen and Leroy didn't take the bait. They stood and watched as Edric Robertson's men charged at General Zephyr. This time General Zephyr stretched out his hands, and the white flames extended out from his hand into the form of a whip. Whip! He whipped the white flames at Edric Robertson's men. One of the men coming at him got caught by one of the whips. It went through his body like a knife through butter. The armor he had on didn't do anything to protect him from the whip. Plop! The man dropped onto the ground with his body in halves. The other men were startled for a moment. General Zephyr unleashed the other whip at them. Blatter! The whip went through the men standing in a row and their upper bodies fell to the ground, splattering the blood and innards all over. General Zephyr pulled back and swung his arms at where Ashen and Leroy were. The whip made of white flames melted the walls, leaving a trail of melted steel and concrete as it shot at Ashen and Leroy. Leroy ducked and the whip missed his head by inches. Beside him, a dark opening appeared, and the whip went into it instead of getting at Ashen. General Zephyr panted as he felt his energy draining away. The white flames engulfing his body started to die out and dissipated. Only the whips made of the white flames remained. Redefining the ability at master level of mastery gives you more power, but it came with a price. It drained more of your energy. Leroy smirked when he saw the white flames went out from General Zephyr's body. It was finally time. He pulled back his arms and threw it at General Zephyr. His arms extended and became long. It reached General Zephyr's feet, and he tried to grab onto it. Whip! General Zephyr reacted and whipped at Leroy's hands with the whip made of white flames. Leroy quickly pulled back his hand and it snapped back to its original length. However, it was enough distraction for Ashen to do his job. A dark opening appeared behind General Zephyr and Ashen got out of it, lunging at General Zephyr. His hands had a dark glow engulfing it. The darkness was the same as the dark openings he had been using. Blatter! Ashen's right hand plunged into General Zephyr's back. He slashed his hand downward, leaving a huge gaping wound from General Zephyr's shoulder diagonally down to his waist. General Zephyr twitched from the pain, and he tried to turn and give Ashen an elbow but couldn't. His spine was broken from Ashen's attack. Plop. He fell forward and he tried to get up with his hands but couldn't. Ashen held his foot over his head and slowly stepped with more strength. "Give us the access code and this nice lady here will heal you back to shape," Leroy said as he grabbed onto the waist of the woman who had healed him earlier and pulled her to his side. "Never!" General Zephyr shouted and gave a push with his arm. Thud. But Ashen stepped hard onto General Zephyr's head with all his strength. General Zephyr's head hit onto the ground, giving out a loud thud. "You think I will put my life above duty?" General Zephyr said as he tried to glance back at Wendy, saying it to remind her. Seeing that General Zephyr wouldn't yield, Ashen stepped even harder, making his head squished against the ground, and his eyes nearly popping out. "D!" General Zephyr shouted as he grabbed onto one of Ashen's feet, and white flames started bursting out of his body. The white flames caught Ashen on his feet and body as it burned in a chilling cold. Chapter 62. We meet again. Ashen shivered as the white flames burnt through his dark armor. A surreal feeling, but the pain quickly brought him back to his senses. He lifted his foot and stomped it down onto the head of General Zephyr. Crack. His stomp cracked General Zephyr's skull. With his hands engulfed in a dark glow, he used his hand and brushed it onto the flames. The flames disappeared into the dark glow immediately. "Lucky you are at master level of mastery to use your dimension ability in this manner," Leroy said as he walked over to the body of General Zephyr. The white flames slowly extinguished as the life force of General Zephyr went away. "Now what do we do, Smarty?" Leroy said, and he smirked at Ashen. Ashen turned back and headed into General Zephyr's living quarters. "Stop where you are," Wendy shouted as she raised her palm to the side of her head. White mist formed as she unleashed her ice ability. Ashen stopped with Leroy following behind. "Your husband is dead." He dragged a chair and sat on it with the back rest in front of him. "Like a proud soldier he was supposed to be," Wendy shouted as she tried to stop the tears rolling in her eyes. Ashen leaned forward and rested his arm on the chair's backrest. "It will be sad if you killed yourself too. Think about your family," he said and took out the family photo with Wendy, Charles, and Patricia in it. Tears trickled down from Wendy's eyes onto her cheeks and dripped onto the ground. "If you help us to open the vault to the southern pillar, we can get your daughter to a safe place. The wall wouldn't hold much longer. They would be facing demonic beasts that are abyssal level." Wendy's mouth opened and she repeated Ashen's last words. "Abyssal level. I will only help you until I see my daughter here," Wendy said as a bargaining chip. Ashen gave her a smile and nodded. "I shall see to it." "Father, let me go. She is my classmate. She will listen to me." Jules Robertson pleaded with his father to let him go with the team assembled to bring Patricia to the underground shelter. Edric Robertson frowned and took off his shades. He was so close now, just another step to the destruction of the city, and he could buy everything back cheap. Tapping his fingers on his gold watch, he pondered for a moment. He knew his son was right. Being Patricia's classmate should be easier to convince her. But he had concerns that Jules Robertson might do something stupid with his raging hormones again. He finally made his decision. "Cale, go with him. Keep him safe and stop him." Edric Robertson glanced at the man in the black suit and neatly combed hair. "Yes, sir. Glad to be of service." Cale bowed and left with Jules Robertson and the team of 10 men. Lucas and the team were on the armored car when they heard a loud boom from the distance. The sound came from the direction of the wall. Everyone frowned at the implications. Virum. Harrianto stepped on the pedal, trying to get to the underground shelter as soon as possible. The armored car roared with its engine, and with a gust of black smoke, it sped towards their destination. When they got to the entrance of the underground shelter, they saw the chaotic situation it was in. Everyone jostled with each other. Some accused others that they stole their essentials. Fights broke out in different groups. Wham! Riley unleashed a lightning strike onto the ground. It caused a small explosion and did the trick. The crowd stopped what they were doing and glanced over at them. All the awakened here, we need your help to come with us on a mission to the north of the city. However, there was only silence. Those awakened without a team didn't answer. Some tried to keep a low profile by lowering their heads. Lucas! A familiar voice cried out, and Lucas glanced over at the direction where it came from. Patricia stepped forward with her classmates following closely behind. The classmates were surprised when they saw Lucas with Riley. They gasped when they noticed the bloodstains on Lucas. He had been battling while they could only stay here in the underground shelter trying to keep hooligans from brawling. It wasn't too long ago when Lucas was a student just like them. But look at him now. What a different world they were in. My parents work around the area. I can help as an awakened. She glanced at Lucas with admiration. Lucas was fighting bravely while she was here in the underground shelter out of harm's way. Sorry, but no. We don't take anyone that's still a student in high school or the Awakened Academy. Lucas shook his head and said, But we could. Patricia wanted to continue, but someone nudged her from behind. The classmates weren't about to go and sacrifice themselves, so they tried to stop her. She sighed and nodded her head. We don't have much time left. Let's go, Rex said, and Lucas nodded at Patricia and turned away. Before they could get onto the armored car, they heard engine sounds roar in the distance. The engine sounds became louder and louder. 3 armored trucks stopped, and the doors opened. Men in full gear alighted with their rifles raised on full alert. A familiar face appeared with a smirk on his face. It was Jules Robertson with Cale in his black suit. Well, well, who do we have here? Jules Robertson said, and he waved his hand. The men in full gear fanned out and encircled Lucas and the team. Riley, Rex, Emma, and Harrianto glanced over at Lucas, and Lucas shrugged his shoulders. Patricia! When Jules Robertson saw Patricia not far away from Lucas, his face turned red. Come with me to safety. Your parents are safe with my father. This place isn't safe anymore. The wall is going to fall soon. There's no way they can deal with a demonic beast at abyssal level. Fear struck everyone when they heard the words abyssal level. Some of them panicked and ran towards Jules Robertson. Let us go too. Bang! The men opened fire and they fell onto the ground with a pool of blood slowly gathering underneath their bodies. Murderer! The crowd shouted, but no one dared make another move. Jules Robertson lost his patience and shouted at Patricia, You made me do this! He glanced over at Cale, and Cale stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Chapter 63. How? Lucas frowned as what Jules Robertson said made him ponder. There must have been something else going on. Edric Robertson wasn't one to let his son waste time and come get his sweetheart. And if Jules Robertson was telling the truth, Patricia might be crucial for Edric Robertson's plan. He glanced over at Riley, and Riley was also pondering about the same thing. I shall see how you go up against someone like Cale. Your SSS level ability that makes you strong is nothing compared to Cale's ability, Jules Robertson said with a smirk. He had gathered information about Lucas's ability earlier, and he was confident that Cale's SSS level blood ability at Adept Mastery was more than enough to deal with Lucas. Lowly peasants like Lucas deserved to be killed and thrown into the garbage can. Cale stood in front of the bodies and held his hands up. The pool of blood that was beneath the bodies started moving and moved towards Cale like a snake. Lucas saw what was happening and he lunged at Cale. Lucas! Patricia and the other classmates gasped out when she saw Lucas making the move. Seeing him fearless and going up against a killer was something they've not seen before. They looked down, fearing the worst for Lucas. Jules Robertson's men held up their weapons, and before they could open fire, Riley unleashed a lightning strike at them. The lightning strike fried their bodies from within their armor. Smoke and the smell of charred flesh filled the air. The crowd gave out a small cheer when they saw what happened. Serve them right for slaughtering those innocent citizens. Thud. Lucas's punch hit Cale's chest, giving out a loud thud. However, it didn't do much damage as Cale's body was now covered in armor made of blood. Cale gave Lucas a smirk and said, "That's all you got?" He pulled back his arm and wanted to give Lucas a left hook to the waist. When he tried to do so, he realized that he couldn't move his left arm anymore. Lucas had used his shadow, grabbing onto the shadow of Cale's arm. The blood armor on Cale's body wriggled, turned into spikes and shot out towards Lucas. Lucas leaped back. The spikes didn't stop and followed Lucas. Crack. Lucas placed his hands onto the ground and an ice wall rose. The spikes stabbed into the ice wall, but it was unable to penetrate through it. What? How is this possible? Jules Robertson couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Lucas conjure up an ice wall. How could anyone have more than one ability? It was unheard of. Patricia held her hands up to her chest and was also in astonishment at Lucas having two abilities. She felt comfort in knowing that he was much more capable than she had thought. "Let me go and fight like a man," Cale shouted as he couldn't break free from Lucas's hold. Lucas's strength had simply overpowered him. Flashes of bright light appeared on Lucas's hand and flickers of lightning could be seen on it. What? This can't be. Jules Robertson thought he was out of his mind when he saw Lucas accumulating his lightning strike. Fear began to fill his mind. A sinking feeling made him realize that he might have offended someone he shouldn't have. Patricia and her classmates were also in awe at what they'd witnessed. They couldn't believe that Lucas was someone that they went to school with. And yet they were now miles apart. Many of them lowered their heads and thought about how they kept silent when Lucas was being ostracized. Things might have been so much different if they'd helped. All they had were regrets now that they'd witnessed Lucas's abilities. Wham! Lucas leaped to the side, away from his ice wall, and unleashed his lightning strike at Cale. The lightning strike was simply too fast for Cale to react. And Cale's armor made of blood vaporized from the lightning strike. His innards and skin were also fried from the lightning strike. Plop! Cale fell and hit the ground, giving out a loud sound. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 500. Current slaughter points, 1700/20,000. Host level, 5. Current abilities, 5. Guess you didn't need our help, Rex said as he walked towards Jules Robertson. He grabbed onto Jules Robertson's hair and kicked at Jules Robertson's knees from the back, making Jules Robertson kneel onto the ground. "Let go of me." Jules Robertson tried to struggle from Rex's hold but couldn't. "I wasn't lying. This place is going to be destroyed soon. When the abyssal-level demonic beast does its job, there would be nothing left. Patricia, please come with me, your parents need you," Jules Robertson said and glanced over at Patricia pleadingly. Lucas walked over and looked down upon Jules Robertson. "Tell me the truth. Why do you need Patricia to go with you?" Lucas asked and put his hand on Jules Robertson's wrist. "It's true, her parents." Arg! Pain startled Jules Robertson as Lucas closed his fingers tightly, cracking Jules Robertson's wrist bone. "Stop! I will tell you the truth," Jules Robertson pleaded, and Lucas let go of Jules Robertson's wrist. "My father needs Patricia at the underground base so that her mother would give up the access code to the southern pillar." Jules Robertson went on to brief them on what his father wanted. After hearing what Jules Robertson said, Lucas and the team pondered. "How many of the Shadow Lotus members are there?" Lucas asked. "There are 2 of them," Jules Robertson quickly answered, fearing that Lucas might break his bones again. "We can pretend to be his men and bring Patricia with us," Lucas said, pointing to Jules Robertson's men in their full armor with full face helmets, lying on the ground. Their mission was to protect the southern pillar from harm, and they might be able to take the enemy by surprise. Riley and the other team members nodded at his suggestion. Lucas went up to Patricia and said, "You must be anxious about your parents. We need you to go with us, but there might be high risks involved. Would you be willing to do so?" It didn't take long for Patricia to nod her head. The thoughts of her parents were enough to convince her. Lucas and the team members then got into the armor of Jules Robertson's men. Rex and Riley held onto Jules Robertson, preventing him from running away. They got on the armored vehicle and headed towards the underground shelter. Boom! After they left, the earth shook again, and flames could be seen in the distance of the wall. Those that were in the underground shelter looked warily at the flames, praying that things would be all right. Chapter 64, Going Deeper. Rodney wiped the blood off his forehead. The blood dripping down was getting into his vision. Everything had gone south at the wall. The commander of the wall was already dead, and Thorne Blackmore and his men were trying their best. But there were just too many of them. Some of the skeletal tigers had overrun the wall and gotten into the city, and the demonic beast that was as tall as the wall had wreaked havoc with its flames. They were helpless whenever it unleashed flames that could even melt the wall. Boom! Thorne Blackmore fell from the sky and lay beside Rodney. His metallic body got deformed from the impact. Rodney, I swear that this isn't what I was tasked. Thorne Blackmore spat out a mouthful of blood and said, Well, that makes two of us. Rodney replied as he helped Thorne Blackmore get up. Whoosh! A flame that was 30 feet high came at them. Thorne Blackmore had to use his metallic body to shield Rodney from the flames. The soldiers in the surroundings weren't as lucky. In an instant they were burnt into ashes by the flame. All around them, there were only despair and death. North of the city underground base. When Edric Robertson saw Jules Robertson's armored car approaching, he gave out a grin. Finally, his son was able to accomplish something. The armored car stopped, and Jules Robertson got down. Where's Cale? Edric Robertson asked when he couldn't see Cale around. He is dead, Jules Robertson said, and Rex nudged him with a pistol from behind. Dead? How is that possible? Edric Robertson frowned as he was sure that Cale could take on most of the awakened in the city. We got ambushed by some renegades, and he did his job, Jules Robertson said with beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Under the threat from Rex's pistol, he raised his hand and showed his fractured wrist to Edric Robertson, making it convincing to Edric Robertson. Anyway, I got Patricia with me, Jules Robertson said, and Patricia got out of the armored car. Finally, we get to meet each other. So, this is the beauty that got my son's heart, Edric Robertson said and gave out a huge smile. Patricia kept quiet and just nodded at Edric Robertson. Come with me. We don't have all day. Edric Robertson's expression changed in an instant, from smiling to being stern, and he led them into the underground base. Along the way, Lucas saw the guards lying on the ground, and he figured that the Shadow Lotus members must have some ability to be undetected. They then took a lift and got deep down inside the underground base. When they arrived at the level where Patricia's parents' office was, they saw Ashen and Leroy with Wendy, waiting for them. Mother! Patricia called out to Wendy. She wanted to run towards her mother but was stopped by Lucas. Wendy was happy to see that Patricia was safe and alive. Ashen glanced over at Wendy and said, See, what did I tell you? Now let's get to work, shall we? He grabbed Wendy by her arms and led her to the secured lift beside the office. Wendy hesitated for a moment before placing her palm on the security panel. But seeing Patricia alive and safe right here in front of her convinced her to make a decision. Ding! After a buzz, the lift door opened. They got into the lift and got down further into the underground base. Lucas could feel the temperature getting lower as they descended. What could the southern pillar be for it to be hidden so deep within the underground base? He thought. Ding! After a minute or so, the lift stopped and they got out. The area outside the lift was huge. Walls were made of steel and concrete. And further out at the other end, there was a huge device. They walked over to the device and Lucas looked at it carefully. There were tubes connecting to the device. Red liquid ran through the tubes. What was inside the device must have been the southern pillar. Ashen then led Wendy over to a control panel in front of the device. Key in the access code now, Ashen said. Lucas glanced over at Riley, and Riley gave him a nod. It was now or never before Wendy entered the access code. Whoosh! Lucas unleashed an ice spike at Ashen. As the ice spike got near Ashen, a dark opening appeared, and the ice spike went into it. What's happening? Edric Robertson shouted. Rex hurled Jules Robertson at him, and they smashed into each other, falling onto the ground. Leroy got into action, and he whipped his arms at Lucas. Crack! An ice wall appeared in front of Lucas, but Leroy's arms penetrated it, and it shattered into pieces. Leroy's fist hit Lucas's chest, and Lucas slid back for a few feet. The impact fractured his ribcage, but it healed immediately with his SSS-level physique. Ashen also joined in with his hands covered in a dark glow. He swiped with his hands horizontally at Lucas. Lucas ducked and he leaped away from Ashen. Ashen wanted to give chase but couldn't. His arms were held by something. Before Ashen could break free, he felt his hair stand on end. Wham! Lucas unleashed a lightning strike at Ashen from close range. And the lightning strike hit. Arg! Ashen gave out a cry in pain. Leroy wanted to come to Ashen's rescue but was stopped by Emma and Riley. He whipped his hands at them but quickly pulled them back. Emma blew her red poison at Leroy's hands, which burned his skin. Standing beside her, Riley started to accumulate energy for his lightning strike. Wham! When it was enough, Riley unleashed his lightning strike at Leroy. It missed as miraculously, Leroy's form changed, and he dropped to the ground like a puddle of flesh. The puddle of flesh moved, and it lunged at Riley. Riley punched at it, but he felt as if he hit water. The puddle of flesh then wrapped around his arms and traveled to his neck. Riley's face turned red as the puddle of flesh strangled his neck. Riley! Emma drew out her knife from the armor and stabbed at the puddle of flesh. But it didn't do any damage as the blade of the knife went through the flesh like dipping into water. Chapter 65. Wait? What? Emma wanted to use her poison but decided against it. It was too close to Riley and Riley would get hurt from her poison too. She tried to use her hand and get the puddle of flesh away but couldn't. Her hand slipped into it, and she wasn't able to hold on to anything. Sizzle. Flickers of lightning appeared on Riley's hands, and he quickly unleashed his lightning strike onto the puddle of flesh. It worked. The puddle of flesh gave out a charred smell and it dropped to the ground. Riley quickly leaped away from it. This gave Emma her opening. She took a deep breath and blew out all the poison she had at the puddle of flesh. The poison, upon contact with the puddle of flesh, burned it and a tinge of crimson appeared in the puddle of flesh. It quickly moved away from the poison like a snake. Ashen saw Leroy's retreat and he glanced over at Patricia. Lucas saw Ashen's reaction, and he unleashed another lightning strike at Ashen. A dark opening appeared out of thin air and the lightning strike went into it. Lucas expected this and he didn't stop. An ice spike appeared on top of Ashen's head and shot down at it. Crack! The ice spike hit but wasn't able to penetrate through the head of Ashen. Ashen was now covered in a dark glow that engulfed his body. And to Lucas's surprise, Ashen's arms broke free from his shadow's hold. The dark glow was able to cut off his shadow wielder's ability, as if the dark glow existed in another dimension. Lucas unleashed another lightning strike at Ashen. The lightning strike disappeared into the dark glow and nothing else happened. Ashen ignored Lucas and he lunged at Patricia the very next moment. Patricia, who was with her mother, couldn't react in time. Standing beside them, Harrianto punched at Ashen with his robotic fist he had created with the electronics in the surroundings. Whoosh! The robotic fist disappeared into the dark glow and Harrianto quickly stopped and pulled back his arm. Ashen smirked as there was nothing here that could stop him with his SSS-level dimensional ability at master level of mastery. He raised his hand wanting to grab onto Patricia, but out of nowhere an orange glow appeared. And out of it a dragon-like demonic beast came out of it. Sheba looked at Ashen curiously with his dark glow. It grinned and lunged at Ashen with its mouth wide open. Ashen didn't dodge but threw a punch at Sheba, thinking that Sheba would be sent into the void when Sheba came into contact with his dimensional ability. Crack! Sheba took a bite onto Ashen's arm and devoured the dark glow engulfing it. Its sharp fangs also bit into Ashen's arm, cracking his bones. Ashen couldn't believe what had happened and he punched at Sheba's head with his other hand. Sheba let go and dropped to the ground, dodging his punch. Tried to have a go at Ashen's legs next. Ashen quickly leaped away. He couldn't make out what this demonic beast was. How could it devour the void? Sheba didn't stop, and it lunged at Ashen, chasing after him. A dark opening appeared in front of Ashen, but Sheba just opened its mouth and swallowed it whole. Ashen smirked when Sheba got close. He stepped into a dark opening that appeared behind him. The dark opening closed, and he disappeared into thin air. Lucas knew something was up, and he quickly lunged at Patricia. However, he wasn't fast enough, as Ashen appeared from a dark opening behind Patricia, and he pulled her into it. His hand could only grasp onto a few strands of Patricia's blonde hair. "Patricia!" Wendy shouted when she saw what had happened. Ashen's voice boomed in the air out of nowhere and said, "Key in the access code now or else." A photo floated down from the top of Wendy and landed on the ground. It was the family photo of her family. The thought of losing another family member triggered her, and she quickly turned back towards the control panel. Her swift decision caught everyone by surprise. Before anyone else could stop her, she swiftly entered the access code onto the keypad. Ashen appeared with Patricia and stepped out of a dark opening beside Leroy. He kicked Leroy's clothes to him as Leroy had turned back into his natural form. "Put it on and get ready to leave," Ashen said, and Leroy put on his clothes with a grumble. Ashen then took out the briefcase and opened it. Using the governor's severed hand, he used the governor's finger to press onto the red button. Whirl. With the access code entered and governor's lock unlocked, the huge device started to give out a whirling sound. LED lights started to blink rapidly. Liquid in the tube turned from red to green. No one knows what to expect next. Ashen pushed Patricia towards Wendy and said, "It didn't have to be so difficult if you had listened from the start." Wendy pulled Patricia into her arms and gave her a big hug. Tears rolled down her eyes as she struggled to tell Patricia what happened to her dad. Wham! Lucas unleashed a lightning strike at Ashen, trying to stop him. But Ashen's body was in the dark glow, absorbed the lightning strike, and nothing else happened. "You are an interesting one. I shall remember you," Ashen said with a smirk while he stared at Lucas. A dark opening appeared behind Ashen, and he pulled Leroy beside him, and they stepped into it. The dark opening closed, and they were gone. Clank. The huge device suddenly gave out a loud noise. Steam hissed out from some of the vents. The liquid in the tube was now empty. Lucas and the others turned over and looked at the huge device intensely. Flickers of lightning appeared on his hand as he got ready. Finally, an enclosure in the huge device opened and revealed what was inside. A woman who seemed to be in her 30s was inside. Tubes were connected to various parts of her body. Lucas and the other team members didn't know what to make of it, as this was the last thing they would have expected. "This woman is the Southern Pillar?" Lucas thought to himself silently. Chapter 66. Sightseeing. "Is it time already?" The woman opened her eyes and said. She gave out a yawn and tried to stretch herself, but stopped when she felt the tubes pulling at her skin. Frustrated, she pulled out the tubes and stepped out of the enclosure. "Who are you?" Rex asked as he gave her a huge grin. The woman gave out a laugh and shook her head. "Cool down. I'm old enough to be your great-grandmother. But thanks for letting me know I still have some of that appeal." Lucas interjected and asked, "Are you the Southern Pillar?" The woman frowned and said, "Southern Pillar? That's what they call me nowadays? I prefer that you call me Athena." Athena glanced at the surroundings and saw the marks left behind by the fighting. "So, I guess it isn't the right time yet." She gave out a sigh and said, "Time for what?" Lucas asked. Athena hesitated for a moment and shook her head. "That's not your burden to bear. Why don't we discuss the issue at hand? Why did you get me out of my hibernation?" Wendy didn't know how to respond, and she could only stammer. Lowering her head, Wendy began to think of the different consequences due to what she had done. But her mind was blank, as she had no idea at all. "Nah, it's all right, dear." Surprisingly, Athena just tilted her head and gave Wendy a pat on her head. Lucas stepped in the next moment and briefed Athena on what had transpired, to which Athena just nodded as she listened. It seemed to Lucas that nothing was out of the ordinary for Athena, as if she had been through it countless times before. Well, if that's what they want, then let old Granny here give them a good show. Athena gave out a chuckle and said, "Bring me up to the surface and I'll show them what I'm made of." "Are you sure?" Rex asked with doubt as he couldn't see how. "Ah, sweetie, I'm sure of it." Athena chuckled and pointed her finger at Rex. Uncontrollably, Rex's ability activated, and his body turned into rocks. However, it didn't stop as the rocks turned larger. "Stop!" Rex cried out in anxiety. Athena snapped her finger and Rex turned back to his normal self. How did you do that?" Rex wiped the sweat off his forehead and asked. "It comes with the perk of being the first awakened in the land," Athena said and walked towards the lift. "First awakened?" Lucas repeated the words as he pondered on what it meant. From whatever knowledge he had, Lucas knew that the first awakened appeared decades ago when the demonic beasts also began to show up and attack. Why would they have kept her in? He glanced over at Haryanto to see if he had any idea. But Haryanto was just as bewildered as he was. "You fellows coming with me or what?" Athena said, impatiently waiting at the lift door. "Lucas and Rex come with me. Emma and Haryanto stay behind." Riley made the decision and they split up. Lucas, Riley, and Rex with more fighting power would go with Athena up to the surface. Emma and Haryanto would stay in the underground base to take care of Edric Robertson and Jules Robertson. They might still have valuable information regarding the Shadow Lotus. And if the beast horde was dealt with, their information would come in handy. Fresh air. Athena walked out of the underground base and took a deep breath. Cough. She gave out a cough instantly. There was smoke coming from all over the city. Out in the distance, fire was raging everywhere. Athena twitched her mouth and said, "So much for the air." They got into an armored car and headed towards the city. Along the way, all they saw was death. Bodies that were of young and old lay on the streets. That's such a welcoming sight. It was far more lively and peaceful back then. Athena shook her head at what she saw. Lucas and the others also felt the horror and tragedy that they were witnessing. Boom! When they got near the underground shelter, a bone spike shot at them from the air and ripped through the armored car's engine. The armored car stopped, and 3 skeletal tigers appeared from the ravaged buildings. Lucas and the others got out of the armored car. Those awakened guarding at the entrance of the underground shelter shook in fear. They were just a few moments away from imminent death before Lucas and the others showed up. However, they could only pray for the safety of Lucas and the rest, as the odds of killing a high-tiered demonic beast were low. "All right, I guess my sightseeing time is up," Athena said and glanced over at Lucas. "Take care of the rest while I handle the big guy. I know you are capable of it." She patted Lucas's shoulder and walked away from him. After she got far enough away from everyone else, she gave out a loud roar. A white glow of light appeared from her body. It slowly expanded and engulfed her in a spherical form. The wind blew and lightning strikes emitted from the spherical glow. When it finally died down, Athena was miraculously floating in the air. Boom! She flew towards one of the skeletal tigers, giving out a sonic boom from the speed. The skeletal tiger didn't have any time to react before Athena went through it, ripping it into pieces. She then went on and flew towards the direction of the abyssal-level demonic beast. Everyone looked upon Athena in awe, as it was nothing they'd seen before, taking out a high-tiered demonic beast so easily without much effort. A thought went through their mind. There might still be hope. Roar! The roar of the remaining 2 skeletal tigers brought everyone back from their thoughts. Lucas placed his hands on the ground and ice appeared from it. The ice slowly extended out towards one of the skeletal tigers. The skeletal tiger leaped away from the ice, but it was yanked to the ground immediately. Using his shadow wielder, Lucas had pulled the skeletal tiger back to the ground. The ice turned and extended towards where the skeletal tiger was. Thick ice formed around the skeletal tiger's body, but it wasn't enough. Crack! The skeletal tiger broke free from the ice. Wham! Before it could make its next move, Lucas unleashed a lightning strike at it. Chapter 67. Slaughter Points. The lightning strike hit the skeletal tiger's head. Its fur and flesh were now blackened and charred from the lightning strike. Roar. Using its paw, the skeletal tiger tried to lessen the pain but gave out a roar in pain instead. However, it wasn't over for the skeletal tiger. Lucas unleashed another lightning strike at the skeletal tiger. Wham! The lightning strike hit again. Blood and flesh splattered into the surroundings from the skeletal tiger's head. With portions of its skull showing, the skeletal tiger didn't stop and lunged at Lucas. Those awakened who were guarding the underground shelter had their hearts in their throats. Lucas had already unleashed his ice ability and lightning ability a couple of times. Even Riley couldn't sustain such a high rate of utilizing the lightning ability. Their worries lessened when they saw flickers of lightning appear in Lucas's hands again. As the skeletal tiger got near, opening its mouth with sharp fangs, countless spikes made of bones shot at Lucas. The crowd gasped out in fear again, as they saw no way out for Lucas, even with his lightning strike. The bone spikes were coming at him from a wide angle. Lucas stomped his feet onto the ground and an ice wall rose in front of him. Crack. The bone spikes could only penetrate halfway through the ice wall, and it was enough to buy time for Lucas to leap into the air. Up in the air, Lucas unleashed the lightning strike accumulated on his left hand. Wham! The lightning strike hit again and cracked the skull of the skeletal tiger open. As he descended to the ground, Lucas unleashed the lightning strike at the cracked skull of the skeletal tiger. Bladder. The head of the skeletal tiger exploded, and the bone, flesh and gray matter splattered out in all directions. What? He really did it? That was 4 or 5 lightning strikes in a row? Lucas is so different now. There might be hope for us now. To everyone's astonishment, Lucas managed to defeat a high-tiered demonic beast right in front of their eyes. Some were astonished about his energy level and how he was able to sustain unleashing so many lightning strikes at one go. His ex-classmates were still feeling surreal at the difference in power between them and Lucas. Others saw hope for themselves. They and the civilians inside the underground shelter might be saved after all. In the shelter, a young girl, Cynthia, standing on her toes, peeped out of the air vent and saw what happened. Bundy, who was beside her, pulled her back to his side and said, "Everything will be all right." Before they sat down onto the ground, he took a glance at the familiar figure battling with the skeletal tigers from the air vent. At the same time, a familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 700. Current slaughter points, 2400/20,000. Host level, 5. Current abilities, 5. A surge of energy came back into his body. He glanced at the slaughter points and saw that he was close to having enough to upgrade one of his abilities. Roar! Lucas quickly turned his focus back to the other skeletal tiger. Rex conjured up a rock wall, but the skeletal tiger smashed right through it. And Riley hadn't accumulated enough energy for his lightning strike. Could only shock the skeletal tiger for a moment, making it give out a loud roar. When it regained its senses, the skeletal tiger swiped its paw at Rex, hurling him into the air and tumbling across the ground. Smash! He stopped after he crashed into a building's wall beside the underground shelter. Fortunately, Rex had activated his ability and turned his body into rocks. The skeletal tiger stomped its paws onto the ground next and bone spikes protruded from it, extending out towards Riley. Riley leaped away and the bone spikes went past him. Wham! Lucas had leaped into the air and unleashed a lightning strike at the skeletal tiger. The skeletal tiger tried to dodge the lightning strike but couldn't. The lightning strike hit its left eye, causing it to thrash around in pain. After Lucas landed, he leaped to the left side of the skeletal tiger, taking advantage of its loss of vision. He used his shadow and grabbed onto the shadow of the skeletal tiger's head. The skeletal tiger jerked its head, swiped its paws at the air as it tried to break free from Lucas's hold. However, it couldn't, and all it could do next was unleash bone spikes in his direction. Crack! Lucas conjured an ice wall from the ground to protect himself from the bone spikes. The bone spikes couldn't get through the ice wall, and Lucas lunged at the skeletal tiger, charging right through it. Flickers of lightning were now flickering around Lucas's hands. When he got near enough, he unleashed both lightning strikes that had accumulated in his hands. Wham! The head of the skeletal tiger exploded from the lightning strike's impact. Its paws stopped in the middle of the air, and the skeletal tiger's body dropped to the ground with a loud thud. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 700. Current slaughter points 3100/20,000. Host level 5. Current abilities 5. SSS level physique. Novice 0/3000. SSS level shadow wielder. Novice 0/3000. SSS level summoner. Novice 0/3000. SSS level ice ability. Novice 0/3000. SSS level lightning ability. Novice 0/3000. Upgrade ability.
y/N.
Lucas thought about upgrading the lightning ability, and another information panel appeared. Improvements in adept level of mastery, SSS level lightning. Half the time to accumulate lightning strike. Half the amount of energy used. Unleash pillars of lightning from the air. He was quite happy with the improvements if he upgraded the lightning ability. But he didn't want to decide so soon before going through the other abilities. Lucas thought about upgrading the other abilities, and the information appeared. Improvements in adept level of mastery, SSS level physique. Enhanced healing, able to regrow limbs. There wasn't that much improvement for his physique ability, as becoming stronger depended on his slaughter system level. So he went on with the next ability. Chapter 68. Granny Power. Improvements in adept level of mastery, SSS shadow wielder. Split shadow into 2. Break off shadow within 60 feet. Lucas frowned as he wasn't too keen on it. Now that he had long-distance attacks with his ice and lightning abilities, his shadow wielder ability was used more as an element of surprise. He went on with the next ability. Improvements in adept level of mastery, SSS level summoner. Packed with one more summon beast. Share strength with summon beast for 5 seconds. This time he was intrigued again. However, Sheba had proven itself to be more than reliable, and he didn't feel that he had a pressing need to have one more summon beast for the time being. Finally, he thought about his ice ability. Improvements in adept level of mastery, SSS level ice. Half the time to conjure ice. Twice the thickness and strength for the ice. Unleash small blizzard of ice spikes. He pondered for a moment, carefully weighing the pros and cons of upgrading each ability. Finally, he made his decision. Ding! Congratulations, host! SSS level lightning upgraded to adept level of mastery. Lucas, one of his ex-classmates who was guarding the underground shelter, called out to him. But Lucas didn't bother with him and walked over to Rex. Reaching out his hand to Rex, Lucas asked, "You all right?" Rex, who was sitting on the ground, still recovering from the impact, held onto Lucas's hand and stood up. "You could have spared that beast for us," he said as they walked over to Riley. Riley brushed his long blue hair and patted Lucas on his shoulder. "You are so much better than I thought." Lucas's ex-classmates thought so too, but it was too late for them. They were in 2 different worlds now. No amount of regrets could change the past. Boom! Loud explosions from afar shook the ground, and everyone glanced over in the direction. Thorn Blackmore was carrying Rodney on his back. He could feel the warmth from Rodney's blood soaking onto his back. They had retreated from the wall, as it had been destroyed by the abyssal skeletal tiger. Soldiers and the awakened teams had sustained an incredible amount of injuries and deaths. All they could do was try and delay the demonic beasts from entering the city. "Albert, you!" Rodney mumbled as his consciousness started to fade. All he had in mind was whether Albert had gotten to safety, and together with him, Albert's wife. Albert. Thorn Blackmore didn't know why Rodney was mumbling this name, but he didn't have much time to think. He could hear the growls of demonic beasts coming near him. Thorn Blackmore ran and saw something unusual traveling towards him at great speed. It was a glowing white sphere, and when it went past him, lightning strikes rained down onto the demonic beasts that were encircling him. Bladder. The demonic beasts splattered into a red mist immediately from the lightning strike. Thorn Blackmore looked up in awe as he saw the white glowing sphere fly towards where the abyssal skeletal tiger was. The southern pillar! He exclaimed out loud as he knew that was the only answer. He felt partly joy and partly an unsettled feeling. Joy as it would save the civilians from demise. Unsettled as with the southern pillar being out of hibernation, things would get complicated later. He gave out a sigh and shook his head. What the center administration had in mind might not even materialize, he thought. What was that? We are saved. Wake up! Look at that! Soldiers and awakened teams cheered at the glowing white sphere, not knowing what it was. Some waved excitedly at the white glowing sphere. Their injured friends and buddies also did the same lying on the ground beside them. You can thank old Granny here later, Athena said to herself as she saw the soldiers and awakened team's reactions. She still had a demonic beast to deal with. Swipe. When she flew near the abyssal skeletal tiger, it swiped its paw at her, like swatting at a fly. But she was too fast, and the white glowing sphere hit the abyssal skeletal tiger's head. Thud. The force made the huge abyssal skeletal tiger stumble back a few steps. Thousands of bone spikes rained down upon where Athena was. Athena gave a loud roar, and the white glowing sphere started to crackle and unleashed bolts of lightning into the surroundings. The bone spikes hit by the bolts of lightning got vaporized into ashes immediately. Those that got to the white glowing sphere couldn't penetrate it and vanished into the ether. Whoosh! The abyssal skeletal tiger flapped its huge wings and ascended into the air. It continued to unleash bone spikes at the white glowing sphere as it flew up higher. And as it flew, bones had grown out from the abyssal skeletal tiger's body and covered it. Boom! The white glowing sphere ignored the bone spikes and flew upwards, chasing after the abyssal skeletal tiger, giving out a sonic boom due to its velocity. Thud! Without much time to react, the abyssal skeletal tiger was hit by the white glowing sphere. But it only hit the bone protection and gave out a loud thud. I see that they've gotten smarter. In the good old days, it was much easier. Athena lamented to herself. After not talking for so many decades, she had wanted to speak out her mind now. Strands of lightning then extended out from the white glowing sphere. The strands of lightning then moved like a whip, whipping onto the abyssal skeletal tiger's bone protection. Whip. The strands of lightning hit one after another. It didn't take long for it to break through the bone protection. The bone protection cracked and the strands of lightning hit the body of the abyssal skeletal tiger. With every lash, the strands of lightning dug into and took out huge chunks of flesh. Blood that spurted onto the white glowing sphere was quickly vaporized away into a red mist. Soon, with the constant whipping, the surroundings near the white glowing sphere became dyed with a tinge of dark crimson. The abyssal skeletal tiger then finally stopped flapping its wings and it descended towards the ground. Chapter 69, Slave of the Light. Tremble. When the abyssal skeletal tiger landed on the ground, it shook the earth from its humongous impact. Thorn Blackmore and the surviving soldiers had to steady themselves with their hands holding onto something. As they stabilized themselves, they quickly glanced over to see what was happening in the battle. Boom! The white glowing sphere shot down at the abyssal skeletal tiger, giving out a sonic boom. All the abyssal skeletal tiger could do was give out a roar. It couldn't do much as it was still recovering from the previous impact. Bladder. Huge chunks of flesh splattered out of the abyssal skeletal tiger's body. Some of it dropped and crushed onto the cars parked nearby. The white glowing sphere had plunged itself into the chest of the abyssal skeletal tiger. Flashes of bright light then filled the gloomy skies. Athena had given out another volley of lightning bolts inside the abyssal skeletal tiger's chest. Sizzle. As the lightning bolts hit, the flesh of the abyssal skeletal tiger gave out a sizzling sound. The smell of charred flesh then filled the air. Plop. The paws of the abyssal skeletal tiger crashed down onto the ground as it went limp. Some buildings were instantly crushed by the huge paws. It did it. The abyssal-level demonic beast has been defeated. Let's fight back right now. When the soldiers and awakened team saw what had just happened in front of their eyes, it took them a few moments to let it sink in. A sudden surge of courage and morale filled their hearts. They started to give what they had left at the demonic beasts rampaging inside the city. Boom! A few fireballs hit an ember elephant as it was charging towards a family huddled together in fear. The awakened team members knew it wasn't enough, but they had to try. Now that the abyssal skeletal tiger was taken down. Miraculously, the ember elephant stopped in its tracks after being hit by the fireballs. It started to slowly turn around and walk away. They are leaving. Everyone who saw it cheered. The same thing happened throughout the city. All the demonic beasts seemed to suddenly turn back into their usual selves, turn around, and start to head out of the city. Thorn Blackmore, who was carrying Rodney, quickly ran towards the direction where the abyssal skeletal tiger fell. Time was precious, and he knew he didn't have much time left. Athena floated out of the abyssal skeletal tiger's body and landed beside it. The white glowing sphere slowly became smaller and eventually faded out. She then casually walked over to a damaged bookstore nearby, pulled a chair over and sat on it. Taking a glance at the bestseller books, she silently thought to herself, I guess some things are still the same. Books like Slave of the Light, My Bloodthirst Cheat, and Ascending with Genes were themes that were loved throughout the ages. She raised her hand, and a book from the shelf flew into her hand. A frail-looking young man with pale skin. Athena was hooked right from the first paragraph. As she flipped the pages, her hands began to age. Wrinkles appeared as if someone had pressed the fast-forward button on time itself. Her vision started to blur, and finally, she had to put the book down. Amidst the burning pillars of smoke everywhere, and laying bodies all around her, Athena slowly closed her eyes. Guess this is good night for real. She mumbled to herself and fell to sleep. Her aging process didn't stop as her hands began to become thinner. Athena's face also started to become frail-looking as the flesh dissipated. Slither. A mechanical snake slithered out of the darkness and moved towards Athena. It lifted its body when it got close enough. The head of the snake opened, and a long syringe appeared. The syringe extended out and struck into Athena's spine. Athena startled from the pain, but she was now unable to do much. Her life force was at its end. Fluid was then drawn into the mechanical snake. Next, it extended another apparatus out from its head. This time one with scissors and mechanical arms. The apparatus cut off pieces of flesh, and the mechanical arm harvested it into a container. After it had done its job, the mechanical snake slithered away, back to where it came from. Moments later, Thorn Blackmore appeared as he came running towards where Athena was. Southern Pillar! Thorn Blackmore shouted, hoping that she would be able to respond. He had so many questions for her. Catching his breath, and after he put down Rodney by the side, Thorn Blackmore got near to Athena. Seeing that she looked like she was asleep, he shook gently on her shoulder. However, there was no response, and to his horror, her body started to crumble into ashes. Meanwhile, a skeletal tiger was lunging towards Lucas. Lucas's hands flickered with flashes of lightning while he waited for the right moment. When the skeletal tiger got near enough, Lucas unleashed the lightning strikes on both hands. Bladder. The lightning strike hit the skeletal tiger's face. He didn't wait and unleashed another 2 lightning strikes at the skeletal tiger. Blood spurted and rendered the face of the skeletal tiger into a dark crimson. And before it could make its next move, Lucas unleashed another 2 lightning strikes at it again. The skeletal tiger's head burst into a red mist, and the body dropped onto the ground motionlessly. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 700. Current slaughter points, 800/20,000. Host level, 5. Current abilities, 5. He was panting, but he figured out the limit of his lightning strike with his current energy level. How? Riley was in awe at what Lucas did. To him, Lucas had seemed to become stronger as he killed more demonic beasts. And to be able to unleash so many lightning strikes in such a short interval was unseen before, even for him. Maybe you are right. It's best not to have a match with him. Rex patted Riley on his shoulder and said. Riley didn't bother to respond and rolled his eyes at Rex instead. Lucas's ex-classmates and the other awakened guarding the underground shelter were also shocked. By now, they didn't know what to say anymore. Lucas's ability was simply out of this world. Look, they are getting away. One of the awakened noticed something. With the skeletal tiger dying, the other demonic beasts that were attacking turned and ran back towards the wall. It was good news to everyone. The mechanical snake slithered into the woods at the red areas. A familiar man picked up the mechanical snake. Risa, your pet snake isn't so bad, eh? Leroy said and handed the mechanical snake over to the man he called Risa. Chapter 70. Secretary. Risa was a middle-aged man, but his face was eerily replaced with many electronic parts. His left eye, which gave out a red glow, turned and glanced at the mechanical snake. The mechanical snake slithered up onto the body of Risa, and it slowly broke up into many mechanical and electronic parts. All the parts then joined back into different parts of Risa's body. The container with Athena's flesh and glass tube with her spinal cord fluid was kept in Risa's chest. Time to get away from this forsaken place. And why this trouble to gather the samples? Leroy said as he side-eyed Ashen. Ashen stared at Leroy and said, We need her cells to be active, out of hibernation. And besides that, isn't it an honor to witness one of the first awakened in action? Leroy shook his head, shrugged his shoulders, and scratched his waist. There are more of these first awakened for us to harvest. Trust me, it would get boring soon. Risa had enough of Leroy's banter, and he interjected, Enough. Time for us to get going. Both nodded at Risa, and they walked deeper into the woods. We are safe. My house. That's all I had. Where is my daughter? The civilians that were hiding in the underground shelter came out, and when they saw the carnage, reality set in for them, and their emotions started to flow out. Homes were destroyed. Family members were missing. What they had worked hard for was now gone. Some started to sob uncontrollably, and some looked at the distance in a daze. Lucas was busy harvesting the demonic beast core of the skeletal tigers. After this beast horde attack, he expected the price of things to go up dramatically, so he better made sure he had something to get more resources. When a young girl's voice called out to him from behind, Lucas turned back. Bundy, I'm glad you are all right. Same for me, young man. It was Bundy and his daughter, Cynthia. Cynthia took out something from her pocket and stretched her tiny hand out to Lucas. Lucas looked at it and saw that she was offering him a sweet. Thanks, he said and took the sweet. Daddy says good deeds should be rewarded, Cynthia said and gave a huge smile to Lucas. Looks like you've put what you learned in the abattoir to good use, Bundy said as he marveled at the size of the skeletal tiger. And to think that Lucas was fighting it earlier. Bundy glanced over at Lucas with the utmost respect he can give. All thanks to you for getting me started, Lucas said with sincerity. If Bundy didn't take him in for the job, who knows how he would survive in this beast horde attack without gaining the initial slaughter points. Nonsense, you did all the hard work. I didn't do much, Bundy said and gestured for Lucas to stop arguing with him on this point. Lucas shrugged and sighed. He then squatted down and patted Cynthia on her head. While he was talking with Bundy, Rex, on the other hand, was basking in attention from the civilians. Riley, who wasn't far away, was on the phone. A call had been made to him from Rodney, who had been attended to by a healer and stabilized. Rodney had called Riley to get an update on what happened. And after Riley briefed him on what happened, Rodney instructed Riley and the other team members to get back to the underground base. Sorry to interrupt, but we still have a mission to complete, Riley said with a smile to Rex. Let's get back to the underground base, he said next to Lucas. Lucas bid farewell to Bundy and Cynthia, and together with Rex, they got onto the armored car and drove back towards the underground base. Gather into teams. Go through the rubble and buildings and take out any demonic beasts left behind. Thorne Blackmore was busy organizing the soldiers and awakened teams to sweep the city, while Rodney took care of getting the injured to the hospitals. Clear the routes to the hospitals. Use any vehicles you can. Things went slowly as there weren't many men left around. Thorne Blackmore had asked for more reinforcement, but it would take some time for them to arrive. When Rodney was done, he picked up his phone and called the center administration. "Who is this?" the person on the other side of the call asked. "I'm Rodney, director of the Awakened Center for the Southern Battle Administration area. I request to speak to the secretary for the Southern Battle Administration," Rodney said. Air blew at the phone's microphone. The person on the call, the secretary's assistant, didn't seem too pleased with his call. "The secretary is going to his dinner soon. He might not take the call. And why isn't the governor making this call? Don't you know the chain of command?" Rodney's chest went up and down as he tried very hard to contain his anger. Fire raged within at what he had heard. What did he mean by going to his dinner soon and not being able to take the call? The life of everyone here in the Southern Battle Administration area mattered less than a meal? Rodney would be shouting at the phone if not for his injuries. Pain could be felt in his chest, and Rodney calmed his breathing to make it lessen. "The governor's dead and can only call from hell, if that's what you want to know. I am the next authority in line, and that's why I'm calling. Don't think you need me to recite the section of the Governance Act to you," Rodney said, and the other side of the phone turned silent. He continued and said, "Well, if the secretary deems that his dinner is more precious than the life of the citizens in Southern Battle Administration area, tell him to go ahead. The wall was breached, and we are still tallying the number of deaths even as we speak. If the secretary thinks that his party can get elected again even with this go ahead, I'll make sure everyone knows about this."
No.
"You've mistaken. It was my mistake." The secretary didn't say anything. "In fact, I haven't spoken to him yet." The secretary's assistant knew he messed up and quickly tried to weasel his way out. A plump man in a suit, with so much fat on his cheeks that it squeezed against his eyes, took over the phone. "Rodney boy, it's me. Chapter 71. Pests. Why the anxiety? I sent backup, didn't I? Took me some effort to get the old men in the military to approve it. And trust me, they weren't too keen to expand the resources and men on the Southern Battle Administration area. In the grand scheme of things, the area isn't strategically worthwhile or in terms of resources and production, not good enough for us to maintain it." The secretary's cheeks jiggled as he spoke. Rodney wanted to take a deep breath of smoke but realized that he didn't have his cigar in his mouth anymore. He cursed silently, held the phone closer to his mouth, and said, "Secretary Hanselman, I don't care about your politics and pork barrel dealings with each other. The wall has been breached. We've sustained a massive number of casualties. People are dying. You better send troops, essentials, and medical aid right now. Oh, and one last thing, the Southern Pillar is now dead. Courtesy of the Shadow Lotus." Secretary Hanselman was calm about the fact that there were a massive number of casualties, but he startled for a moment when he heard about the demise of the Southern Pillar and Shadow Lotus. Without the Southern Pillar, the Center Administration's plan of rejuvenation for the Southern Battle Administration area would have to be halted. In the plan, when the time was right, they were supposed to get the Southern Pillar out of hibernation. And with a final push, Athena would fight with the forces from the Center Administration to get rid of the apex, transcendent and primordial tiered demonic beasts that were ruling the mountains and woods. Now that Athena was gone, his grift and gravy train canvassing resources for the final push might be stopped. To make it worse, the Shadow Lotus members were erratic, and no one knows what they wanted. He thought for a moment, trying to come up with a new plan to sustain his grift. Secretary Hanselman struggled for a bit as he tried to sit up straight in his chair, making the chair creak as it did its best supporting his heavy weight. "I'm sad to hear the dire state that the area is in right now. I will do my best to get the budget and manpower to assist in the recovery. Let me get to work as soon as this call ends. Do your best to maintain order. He ended the call and Secretary Hanselman passed the phone back to his assistant. "Get me to the central leader's office." His assistant bowed and got to work. Rodney fumed and looked at the screen of his phone when the call ended. He wasn't sure if Secretary Hanselman would deliver what he said. But there were no other avenues for him. He looked up and saw that things were moving along smoothly. The demonic beasts had cleared out of the city and the injured were being sent to the hospitals. Rodney got on an armored car with a few men and Thorne Blackmore, and they made their way to the underground base. Underground base. Charles and Wendy's office. Patricia was sobbing with Wendy by her side. Wendy was also sad, but she forced herself to keep it in. In front of them was Charles's body, laying motionlessly. It wasn't so long ago that he was alive, working hard and caring for his family. But now, Patricia stopped sobbing, anger rose from within, and she turned towards Jules Robertson. Because of you and Edric Robertson, my father died." Flames appeared in her hands, and she tried to lunge at Jules Robertson. Emma stepped in and gave Patricia a chop on her neck from behind, making her unconscious immediately. Wendy quickly went over and took care of her. "How much longer do we have to stay here?" Rex asked as he gave Jules Robertson a stare. Jules Robertson, who was tied up together with his father, sitting on the floor outside the office, avoided his stare. He never had to endure such humiliation before. And worse of it all, Patricia hated him now. He didn't dare to look anywhere but onto the ground. Jules Robertson stole a glance at Lucas and thought about the different status they were having now. How the times have changed. Lucas had gone from an outcast from high school to an awakened superstar now. As for himself, he had fallen from heaven to hell. A life of riches gone and destined for the gallows. The thought of it made Jules Robertson feel worse than being dead. Lucas was discussing with Riley and Harrianto about the Southern Pillar. Not once did Lucas even bother with Jules Robertson, as if Jules Robertson was just a pest to him. But Jules Robertson didn't even dare to feel anything about it. He and Lucas were no longer in the same realm. The next moment, footsteps could be heard that were approaching. Rex didn't have to wait long for his answer. Rodney and Thorne Blackmore arrived shortly after. "Director, quite a mission you got us on," Riley said, and he brushed his long blue hair. "I will settle the rewards with you later, but first." Rodney walked over to Edric Robertson, and he gave him a kick in the chest. "Arg!" Edric Robertson gave out a cry in pain but couldn't do much except beg for his life. "Stop. You can't do this. It's against the law." "I don't think the law should apply to scums like you," Rodney said and stomped down onto Edric Robertson's thigh. It made Edric Robertson twitch in pain. "Now, tell me all that you know about the Shadow Lotus." Rodney looked down onto Edric Robertson and said, "I'll tell you what I know." Edric Robertson then disclosed how someone had contacted him through a business contact called Peter Lim from the West Battle Administration area, and how this group called the Shadow Lotus proposed a plan to him. He agreed to the plan and helped coordinate for them to plant the devices outside the wall. Peter Lim. Devices. Lucas mumbled to himself as he thought about what Edric Robertson had said. The next moment, he looked up and suggested, "Harrianto might be able to get some clues out of those devices out there." Rodney nodded but frowned. Chapter 72. Stake time. Rodney glanced at Lucas and the others. Their armor and clothes were now soaked in blood after the long and tough battle. All of them except Lucas looked exhausted. He wasn't going to send them out there in such a condition. And on top of that, there was the risk that no one knew what was still lurking out there. Lucas saw Rodney's reaction and he nodded his head. His teammates didn't have a slaughter system like he had. So, he took note to be more aware of his teammates' condition in the future. "I think it's best for you to go back and have a good rest. Investigate the devices later," Rodney said and focused back onto Edric and Jules Robertson. "Stop. I've told you everything I know," Edric Robertson begged as he saw Rodney hold up his hand. Jules Robertson was too shocked and peed himself. Slap. Rodney gave them a slap each, rendering them unconscious. "Take them to where they belong," locked up like the animals they are. His men then came over and dragged them away. They sneered at Jules Robertson as they weren't too happy with the stench coming from Jules Robertson. Thorne, I believe that, in the military, you have awakened that specialize in interrogations? Rodney glanced over at Thorne Blackmore and asked. He wanted to verify what Edric Robertson said was the truth with the interrogator. I will see to it. Thorne Blackmore agreed on the spot. Thanks to Edric Robertson, Thorne Blackmore was in a near-death situation, and he wasn't going to let Edric Robertson get off so lightly. After they got out of the underground base, Lucas and the team hopped onto one of the armored cars and left. It was finally time for them to head home and rest. Who would have thought that a mission set out to take out Pac-Man J would turn into something that nearly caused everyone's death? On the way back, they saw the carnage and how much of the city was destroyed. 3 out of 10 buildings were gone. Rubble piled up alongside the buildings that were still standing. On and off, Lucas and Rex had to get down from the armored car and clear the path whenever it was blocked by rubble. And after an hour of travel, they finally arrived back home. Fortunately for them, the building was still standing. Everything looked to be the same when they left. The bodies of Higgs' team were still lying out in the garden area. Emma got to work dealing with the bodies. She used her poison and disintegrated the bodies into fertilizers for the plants. Haryanto also tried to fix the electronic fence, but he was too tired by now. So, they decided to have a good meal first. They rested around the living room while Emma prepared a good meal for everyone. Rex laid on the sofa, scrolled through his phone, messaging his ex-girlfriends to see if any of them would reply. He kept shaking his head as he went down the list. Haryanto was just chilling looking at the social media on his tablet. By his side, Riley was checking on his family. Lucas had summoned Sheba out and it was familiarizing the place. And when it sniffed the aroma of steaks that Emma was cooking, it ran into the kitchen. Manners, buddy, Lucas called out to it as he chased it from behind. And he was just in time grabbing onto Sheba's feet to stop it from devouring the plates of steak Emma had ready. Hello there. You want some of these? Emma squatted down and patted onto Sheba's head when she saw Sheba. Sheba nodded and grinned with its huge mouth. Then, be a good buddy and wait for a moment. After patting its head, Emma stood up and took out more steaks from the fridge. And as they waited, Lucas asked about Sheba. Any one of you have seen another demonic beast like Sheba before? Everyone in the team shook their head. Haryanto tried searching in his digital encyclopedia of demonic beasts but couldn't find anything. Finding the answer was tougher than it seemed. Lucas thought he might have to figure it out from somewhere else. Enough about work. Tuck in and get a good night's rest. Emma clapped her hands and announced when she was done. Lucas and the team didn't realize how hungry they were until they took the first bite off the steaks. The steak was done right, tender and melts in the mouth. And the mashed potato was flavorful and filled with the aroma of the broth. For a very long time there were only sounds of munching and cutting of the steaks. Sheba, however, was able to slurp and swallow the steaks at one go. Burp. Everyone laughed when it gave out a loud burp. Rex then copied Sheba and tried to use his hands to feast onto the steak. Tisk! Emma saw and rolled her eyes at Rex. Ouch! Rex gave out a cry, dropped the steak onto the plate as it was too hot. Why did the Shadow Lotus want Athena out of hibernation and save us all? That doesn't make much sense to me, Lucas said as he pondered out loud. Everyone shook their head. They must have been after something. Lucas tapped his fingers on the table as he brainstormed. However, nothing came to his mind on what they could have possibly wanted. Did they want her dead after dealing with the abyssal-level demonic beast? Or did they want to witness how powerful the First Awakened were? But both didn't make much sense. They could have destroyed the hibernation device if they wanted Athena dead. And why would anyone go through so much trouble just to see a show? Rest for the night. Let your subconscious do its work. We might have a long day tomorrow. Riley placed his hand on Lucas's shoulder and said. Lucas felt that he was close, but Riley was also right. It's better for him to focus on the mission tomorrow first. Chapter 73, New Mission. Next day. The sun shone brightly, doing its best to drive away all the doom and gloom in the city. Life still had to go on. Those who had lost loved ones, and whatever they owned, woke up and started to pick up the pieces of their lives. When Lucas woke up, breakfast was ready and waiting for him. "Morning, Lucas. Come join us." The other team members, who were sitting at the dining table, greeted him with their usual candor. "I didn't know what you like. Hope it's suitable for your taste," Emma said as she poured steaming hot coffee into Lucas's coffee mug. "Thanks. I'm fine with anything," he replied with a smile. He remembered how he had to survive a few days with a pizza, and he had to time it correctly so that he finished it before the pizza turned moldy. Anything other than that was an upgrade. "Since everyone is here, I'll brief everyone on today's mission," Riley said as he brushed his long blue hair and put down his mug. "The reward for the mission is $100,000. That's the most the director can offer with his limited budget now. We will go out and gather whatever is left of the devices from outside the city. Haryanto, prepare all the equipment that you need. The rest of you, get armed and equipped. Stay close together and try not to venture out too far into the red zone," Riley said, and the other team members nodded. No one objected. By now it was a personal matter, and the amount for the reward didn't matter much to them. After breakfast, Lucas went back to his room and got ready. His dark matter vault armor was now torn and had many slit holes from the battles. Lucas looked at it and frowned as he didn't realize the damage inflicted on it. "Hope it's still working," he thought. He reached into the chest plate armor and fortunately, the storage function still worked. In his hand, out of nowhere, when he drew it out of the chest plate was an energy bar. With the confirmation that it was still working, he replenished the water and rations in the dark matter vault armor. And after that, he went down to the basement to seek Haryanto's help. In the basement, it was full of electronics and mechanical parts lying all over the ground. Haryanto was assembling something together when Lucas arrived. "What are those?" Lucas asked and pointed at some devices. They looked like robots in the form of hunting dogs. "These are drones that I can control with my ability to sniff and search for the devices." "There's more over there," Haryanto said, pointing to the far corner, which had robots that had mechanical wings. When he finished assembling, he stood up, patted the dust off his pants, and turned over to Lucas. "Come, let me help you with that," Haryanto said, and took the dark matter vault armor from Lucas that he had in his hand. "Thanks." Lucas quickly thanked him. Haryanto got to work immediately. He went over to his workbench and placed the dark matter vault armor onto the workbench. His hands glowed and some of the electronics parts that were on the workbench moved and got onto the holes of the dark matter vault armor. The electronics changed form and merged with the dark matter vault armor. "Here, as good as new," Haryanto said as he passed the dark matter vault armor back to Lucas when he was done. Haryanto then pointed to the drones and said, "Now it's your turn to help me. I need you to help me load them up onto the armored truck." Lucas nodded and started moving the drones onto the armored truck that was parked outside of the driveway. Even though Haryanto already knew Lucas's abilities, he was still astonished at him being able to carry something that was half a ton effortlessly like a paperweight. Soon, Lucas was done loading everything up onto the armored truck. After that, he went back to his room, changed into his dark matter vault armor, and joined the team waiting for him at the armored truck. When he arrived, they hopped onto the armored truck and drove off. Edge of the city, location of the checkpoint. It was a tough ride getting to the temporary checkpoint. There had been much more damage sustained in the areas near the wall. Some roads became inaccessible due to the huge amount of rubble that had blocked off entire sections of the road. Riley had to drive around the fallen buildings or take a long detour to get to the temporary checkpoint. When they arrived, Lucas alighted and saw the damage done to the wall. A portion of the wall that once stood tall was now reduced to a pile of rubble, exposing a huge gaping hole in the wall. Soldiers were excavating the rubble, using bulldozers and excavators, kicking up the dust and making everyone gasp for fresh air. When the soldiers saw Lucas and the other team members, the soldiers smiled and waved at them. They still remembered how Lucas and the other team members had fought valiantly alongside them. "You want to go out there?" The soldier at the temporary checkpoint asked with a worried look, with the ID of the team in his hand. He didn't expect anyone daring to venture out into the woods so soon after a beast horde attack. Riley brushed his long blue hair and replied, "Don't worry, we'll be all right." The soldier at the checkpoint gave out a long sigh and nodded. What was he thinking? From what he had heard, Team Riley was the more formidable out of all the awakened teams. Even the youngest team member fought better than many. With this thought, the soldier at the checkpoint glanced over at Lucas. Lucas looked just like a high schooler, who would have thought that he was battling with high-tiered demonic beasts earlier. "You can go now," he said as he passed them back their ID. Riley thanked the soldier, and they got back onto the armored truck. Along the way, bodies of the demonic beasts strewn around, giving off a putrid smell. The armored truck traveled out 2 miles and stopped. Riley turned around to Haryanto and said, "Time for the show." Chapter 74, Into the Woods. Lucas got off the armored truck with the other team members except for Haryanto. They fanned out and stood on high alert. The surroundings where they stood were sparse with vegetation as they hadn't traveled far into the woods. Haryanto got to the back of the armored truck, held his hands up, and a white glow appeared in his hands. The white glow then darted at the drones that were loaded onto the back of the truck. Buzz. Beep. The drones started to beep and moved. First, the drones shaped like hunting dogs ran out of the back of the armored truck, landed onto the ground and held their mechanical heads up high. The drones with wings followed next and they ascended slowly into the sky, flapping their mechanical wings. Beads of sweat appeared on Haryanto's forehead as he controlled the drones to do their job. In his mind, he could see and feel the sensations the drones relayed to him through their sensors. The hunting dog drones separated onto their own paths and started scanning the ground for electronic devices. Some stopped and dug with their mechanical feet but could only uncover coins or empty bullet shells. The drones in the air took images of the paths that the demonic beasts took. Finally, Haryanto had to stop as he got too tired. "Nothing much on the ground. Maybe we can figure out something from the air imagery," Haryanto said as he sat down onto the ground. Lucas gave Haryanto an energy bar and said, "That sounds like an idea." Immediately, he received a message from Haryanto with the aerial images. The other team members also received it, and they started to look at the images. Lucas inspected the paths left behind by the demonic beasts carefully. However, he couldn't figure out much as they were too numerous and the paths didn't exhibit any noticeable patterns. He zoomed in and saw the footprints in the paths. In each of the paths, footprints trampled over each other and headed in the direction of the wall. It was a dead end. Lucas zoomed out of the image and tried to see if he could discern something with a big picture view. All the paths converged from within the woods, and they disappeared under the cover of the thick vegetation of the trees. If we go in deeper and see where the paths fully converged, it would be where the demonic beasts started gathering. We might be able to find some of the devices there. Lucas traced the path where they started to converge with the built-in image editing tool, and he showed the image to the other team members. "I think you are right." Haryanto nodded at what he saw. Rex and Emma also nodded. Riley patted Lucas on the shoulder and said, "If everyone is all right with the plan, we venture in, see what we can find out. But we stop if we get near the red zone." With no one objecting to the plan, Lucas and the team members got to work immediately. They got onto the armored truck and drove into the woods as far into it as they could. The woods were eerily dead silent compared to what they were a week ago. Lucas helped Haryanto unload a flying drone and carried it on his back. "Let me know if you need to rest." Haryanto tried to help carry the flying drone, but Lucas shook his head. Even though all awakened were much stronger and more powerful than normal human beings, Lucas with his SSS-level physiques was still much more powerful than other awakened like Haryanto. Carrying a half a ton will take up some effort for Haryanto. They followed one of the paths and traveled on foot for 2 hours. Lucas noticed that the woods were very much different than the areas he had hunted in. The trees had leaves and trunks that were red. Vegetation was thick and harsh. There were spikes and thorns growing out from all the plants. "We are deep inside the amber zone," Harrianto, make use of the flying drone and see how far you can go. Riley stopped the team and said. Harrianto set up the flying drone with his ability and it flew deeper in the woods, maneuvering among the red tree trunks. From the drone's imagery, Harrianto saw that there weren't any demonic beasts around. They must have all perished in the beast horde attack, he thought. Following the path, the flying drone finally reached a spot where the paths converged. Footsteps of the demonic beasts went in a circle near a spot. Harrianto took an image with the flying drone and flew it back. Yes, Lucas was right. I think we found it, Harrianto exclaimed in excitement as he showed the image taken by the flying drone. Lucas leaned in and took a closer look at the image. At the center of the footsteps circling around, there was a shimmer of silver. Something metallic was lying there. Well done. Thank you so much for that sweet $100,000 reward, Rex said as he rubbed his hands together, while he envisioned how to use the reward money. Lucas frowned, pointed to the insignia and said, We are teammates, remember? Yes, teammates. Rex gave out a laugh and slapped himself on the back of his head. Let's get going, Riley interjected, and they continued on their way. They followed the path that the flying drone had flown in. Soon it got darker and darker in the woods. The canopy was now so thick that it blocked out most of the sunlight. Everyone drew out their weapons and advanced with high alert. Lucas could hear the breathing sounds and heartbeats of his teammates in the eerily silent woods. Finally, the path began to clear with fewer trees and vegetation. There were fallen trees where the demonic beasts had gathered, and they slowly approached towards the center of the encircling footsteps left behind. There! Harrianto pointed at a metallic device that pointed up into the sky, looking like a mini version of a satellite radio. He took a step forward. Beep! The device stuck into the ground started beeping. Chapter 75. Device captured. Stop it quick! Riley shouted and Harrianto quickly ran towards the device. His hands gave out that white glow and the white glow darted at the device. Within a second, the white glow got repelled out of the device. Harrianto focused intensely with his ability and tried again. This time, the white glow was able to stay within the device to do its work. Moments passed, and Harrianto's breathing gradually became faster as he tried his best to make the device stop. Lucas and the other teammates quickly surrounded him, giving him protection, while keeping an eye out for any dangers. Beep! Beep! After a few moments, the beeping finally stopped. Harrianto succeeded with his ability. However, he glanced over at his teammates with a worried look. It's a trigger to attract demonic beasts. For one last time and kill those who try to harvest these devices. Lucas frowned as he felt the earth tremble underneath his feet. He looked around but didn't see any demonic beasts coming towards them. Then, he looked down and shouted, "Watch out below!" Everyone else glanced down and saw the earth moving. Lucas leaped away from where he was. Plop! The earth where he was standing suddenly caved in. Riley, Emma, and Rex successfully leaped away from the cave-in. A hole with a diameter of at least 60 feet appeared where they were standing moments ago. However, being in the center of the newly cratered hole, Harrianto's leap could only reach the edge of the hole. Lucas placed his hands onto the ground and the ice extended out, and a platform made from his ice caught Harrianto on it. Thud! Harrianto landed and gave out a muted thud. But it was not over. Lucas glanced down into the hole in the ground, and he saw a mouth as large as the hole with sharp fangs ascending towards where Harrianto was. "Jump!" he shouted at Harrianto as he conjured up a lightning strike in his hand. Harrianto leaped from the ice platform and landed next to Lucas. Snap! The huge mouth with sharp fangs leaped up from the hole and missed Harrianto by mere inches. Its body was long and flexible like a huge worm, and it had a yellow armored body. Tremble! The worm landed its huge body out from the hole, causing the earth to tremble. Lucas didn't wait and unleashed his lightning strike at the huge worm. Wham! The lightning strike hit, and it startled the worm for a moment. Its earthly armor had taken out much of the power from Lucas's lightning strike. Lucas changed strategy and he conjured an ice spike. He waited as the huge worm turned its huge mouth towards Lucas. Bladder! To his surprise, the huge worm opened its mouth, and a huge volume of green liquid shot out of it at Lucas. He quickly placed his hands onto the ground and an ice wall rose, blocking the green liquid coming at him. The green liquid acted very quickly on the ice wall, melting it, and it gave out a white mist when the ice turned into vapor. Thud! Rex threw rock spikes into its mouth, making its body squirm from the pain when the rock spikes plunged into its flesh. Wham! Unleashing his lightning strike, Riley aimed for the wound that Rex had created. It hit and the flesh of the huge worm splattered out from the wound. An ice spike unleashed by Lucas followed, and it plunged into the huge mouth of the worm. The huge worm squirmed in pain, and it closed its huge mouth. It lifted its body up and smashed down at Lucas. Lucas leaped away with Haryanto. Tremble! The earth shook when the body of the huge worm crashed onto the ground. The huge worm lifted its body and tried to smash onto Riley and Emma next. Emma blew out a lungful of her poison from where she was, and after that she quickly leaped away. She could feel the gust of wind beside her when the body of the worm slammed into the ground, sending debris flying all over. Her poison etched onto the armor of the huge worm but didn't do much. The huge worm turned its body and came for Lucas again. It lifted its body, opened its mouth and lunged towards Lucas, trying to swallow him whole. Lucas leaped away, and before the huge worm crashed into the earth with its mouth, a shimmer of an orange glow could be seen from within its mouth. The huge worm started to wriggle as if in pain, thrashing around, kicking up the earth and vegetation. Some of the trees fell when the body of the huge worm crashed into them. Sheba feasted on the flesh of the huge worm from within. It gnawed and swallowed with its tail wagging. Never before had Sheba seen so much food. Burp. Sheba gave out a burp but didn't stop. Lucas and the other team members watched from a safe distance as the huge worm thrashed around. Finally, Sheba popped out from within the huge worm's body, and the huge worm stopped moving. It had eaten its way out. Good work, buddy. Lucas wanted to pat it on its head but stopped. Sheba was fully covered in a mixture of blood and fluids from within the huge worm. It shivered its body, and the blood and fluids on its body flew away, splattering onto Lucas's armor. Lucas sighed and patted Sheba on its head and said, "Help me find the demonic beast core for this worm. It might be worth something." Sheba nodded its head and got to work. It munched itself back into the huge worm's body. "Well, I guess the good news is that the device is still working," Rex exclaimed as he glanced at the body of the huge worm in front of him. "We better get back and let Rodney investigate the device," Riley said and glanced over at Haryanto. "Let Rodney know all the information you got on it once we get back into the city." Haryanto nodded and Sheba appeared again. A demonic beast core was in its mouth as it jumped excitedly towards Lucas. But before it could reach Lucas, its eyes closed, and it fell onto the ground unconscious. Chapter 76. Igor. "Sheba!" Lucas shouted and ran towards Sheba. He kept the demonic beast core in his dark matter vault armor and held Sheba up in his hands. A thought came into his mind. It was Sheba communicating with him. Lucas gave out a sigh of relief afterwards and summoned Sheba back into his summon space. What he got from Sheba was that it needed to rest after such a feast. He didn't think much of it and thought it must have finally been stuffed full for the very first time in its life. It's all right. Just needed a rest after the feast it had. Lucas shrugged and said as his teammates looked on with concern. They gave out a sigh of relief when they heard Lucas. Time to move back into the city. Riley gave the order, and they trekked back from where they came from. Back in the city, they didn't waste time, and they went straight to the Awaken Center. Lucas saw how different the Awaken Center looked. Its well-furnished lobby, with huge glass panes, was now like a war zone. The glass panes were shattered, and the concrete ground had huge gaping holes or pieces of it ripped off by either demonic beasts or powers from the Awakened. Patches of dark crimson from blood that had dried up could also be seen all over the lobby. "We'd like to see the director," Riley said as he brushed his long blue hair at Mandy. Mandy, who survived the demonic beast horde attack, greeted Riley and picked up her phone. After a short call, She put her phone back down and led them to the lift. Out of the 5 lifts, only one was left working. So, they had to wait for quite a while before it was their turn. Rodney finally had his cigar in his mouth, but he wasn't enjoying much of it. He had stacks of documents, stacked up like mountains on his desk, to go through and endless issues for him to handle. Food, water, and essentials had to be arranged. And there was rubble to be cleared and roads to be paved. He drew out a mouthful of smoke from his cigar and glanced at the door. "Please tell me you have good news for me," Rodney said. "As a matter of fact, we do," Riley said, and Haryanto stepped forward. Haryanto took out the device and handed it over to Rodney. "Well done. I knew I could always count on your team," Rodney said as he inspected the device. "There is a substance within the device. Presumably it's what attracts the demonic beasts and gets them into a frenzy." Haryanto briefed Rodney on his findings. "Substance?" Rodney asked. "Unfortunately, I'm not able to decipher it." Haryanto shrugged his shoulders and said, "Thanks." Rodney nodded and thanked Haryanto. It was, after all, not part of their mission to figure it out. "You will get your $100,000 reward within the next hour," Rodney said and gave out a long sigh. There was a need for money everywhere for him to rebuild the city. Lucas and the other team members nodded as they understood his predicament. They left his office next and went back down to the lobby. "Can we purchase weapons and ammunition now?" Lucas asked Mandy when he saw her. His pistol wasn't cutting it anymore, and now that he wasn't hiding from Jules Robertson and Pak Sun-hyun, it was time for him to get an upgrade. Mandy's eyes brightened up when she heard Lucas. Someone spending money in the Awaken Center meant funds for her wages. "We sure do. Business as usual," she said, and quickly led him to where the weapons and ammunition were stored. Lucas looked around at the different array of weapons. He decided to go for a grenade launcher first, then some automatic rifles. Lastly, he went for a .5-inch caliber rifle. Lucas got as much ammunition as he could into his dark matter vault armor. With a huge smile, Mandy gave Lucas the invoice, which he paid immediately. It had cost him $8,000 for everything. Lucas had gotten $160,400 from Skull's account, so he didn't feel much. After he was done, Lucas and the team left the Awaken Center, and they headed for home. "Help! I need some food for my kid." "What? It was only $10 yesterday, and now it's $20? That's robbery. The roads are closed and there wouldn't be supplies coming in anytime soon. Everyone upstream is raising their prices. And that's why I got to raise the price." Along the way, Lucas overheard some conversations, and things were indeed starting to get dire for everyone. Prices were shooting up, and if there wasn't any relief soon, things might get out of hand with so many desperate people around. Leroy fiddled with his fingers as he yawned. He was inside a room with glass tubes and many lab apparatus all around. Ashen stared at him and glanced back at an old man with a container in each of his hands. The containers were what were used to collect from Athena's body. The old man, with a thin head of gray hair, grinned and his body shook uncontrollably. "Finally, after all these years," he said, and raised the containers towards the light on the ceiling to have a better look. With his arms stretched, the sleeves of his white robe slid down and revealed parts of his arms. Eerily, his arms didn't look human as they were covered in scales, and some part of them seemed to be rotten, with the flesh being purple. However, Ashen, Leroy, and Risa weren't surprised by it. "Igor, when can you get your experiments done? I'm eager to harvest the next OG awakened already," Leroy said as he recalled the fun he had. The old man, Igor, narrowed his eyes and put down the containers. He stared at Leroy and his pupils turned yellow, like a demonic beast. Leroy could feel his heart pumping faster and faster. Emotions started to run wild inside him. He started to cry in one moment and cursed out loud angrily the next. Igor's eyes turned back into their old man's gray, and Leroy stopped his erratic emotional outbursts. Chapter 77. West Battle Administration Area. Next time, it'll be more than teaching you a lesson. In case you didn't realize, What I'm trying to achieve here would change this world. Imagine every one of us wielding the powers of the First Awakened and not aging and dying like them. Igor said, and he put the containers into a device. The device whirled and sucked in the flesh and spinal fluid from Athena. It then took over the job of keeping the cells alive. And how do you accomplish that? Even the center administration with all the money and resources couldn't achieve that. The best they could do was to hibernate them. I've joined to have fun and wreak havoc. I'm young and not interested in becoming immortal like some of you. Leroy wasn't too pleased with Igor, and he took a slight dig at him. However, Igor was already engrossed in his work, tampering with the samples they'd collected from Athena. On the screen in front of Igor were all the statistics that the device had measured from the samples. Igor controlled a mechanical arm via a joystick-like device, and the arm picked up a yellow piece of flesh and cut off a small piece from it. Then the mechanical arm did the same from Athena's. The pieces of meat were placed into a petri dish next. Igor pressed a button, and some liquid was injected into the petri dish. Once in contact with the liquid, the yellow meat and Athena's started wriggling, as if the flesh were still alive. Seeing this, Igor got excited and rubbed his hands in anticipation. But his hands stopped after a few moments. The pieces of meat slowly turned brown and then dark, eventually dissolving into the liquid, contaminating it into a dark color. Leroy smirked when he saw Igor fail. He wanted to lash out at Igor but stopped when he heard a booming voice coming from speakers in the ceiling. "Enough! I have the next mission for the three of you." The voice spoke in a strong and deep voice. When he heard the voice, Leroy slumped and cowered his body, fearing that the owner of the voice wouldn't let him off. Lucky for him, the voice briefed them on what they had to do next. Go to the West Battle Administration area and... "You shouldn't have, Lucas. Things are difficult for everyone," Bundy said on the phone and thanked Lucas profusely. Lucas had transferred some money over to Bundy in anticipation that food prices were going to shoot through the roof. Bundy was the person that gave him a job and taught him things when he needed it the most. He wasn't about to let Bundy and his daughter struggle and go hungry. "It's the least I can do. I've got some things to deal with right now, let's talk later." However, Lucas still wasn't used to someone thanking him, and he quickly ended the call, as he didn't know how to react. And Lucas indeed had some other things to deal with. Sheba was still sound asleep, without any sign of waking up soon. He had summoned Sheba out from his summon space and tried to wake it up with the aroma of food, but it didn't work. So he checked again, but Sheba was still sound asleep. Riley had helped to ask around with his friends that had summoner ability, but their responses were the same. It's nothing they'd encountered before with their summoned beasts. Lucas sighed and decided to go down for breakfast. "Think we might need to go on a diet soon," Emma exclaimed when Lucas got down from his room to the dining table. "Everything is at triple the price now." She sighed and passed Riley a receipt of the groceries she had just purchased. Riley frowned when he looked at the amount on the receipt. "Guess we might have to take on more missions to make up for it," he said with a sigh. Rodney had credited their rewards of $100,000, but it was $20,000 after they split it evenly among the team of 5. Most of the teammates except Lucas had already spent half of it getting demonic beast cores that let them become stronger. After the long battle that they had recently, Riley and the others knew they needed to upgrade to the next level. The Shadow Lotus wasn't about to just stop so soon. They were sure of it. Lucas nodded as he wouldn't mind more money, and most important of all, going on missions would allow him to earn more slaughter points to get stronger. Ring. Riley's phone rang and he picked it up. "Speaking of the devil," Riley said and accepted the call. He nodded as Rodney on the other end of the call briefed him on the new mission. When Rodney was done, Riley ended the call and put down the phone. "Well?" Emma asked while pouring hot piping coffee for everyone. Lucas glanced over at Riley with interest. "His men can't figure out what the substance was. We are to transport the substance for analysis in the West Battle Administration area. The director's friend, Dr. Uva, would be helping him with the analysis," Riley said and took a sip of his coffee. "Why us though? Shouldn't he seek help from the center administration?" Haryanto said as he felt it was weird. The director could have made use of the resources from the center administration instead of his friend. Lucas had a hunch to the answer, but he kept quiet as he wasn't so sure. Riley sighed and gave out the same answer as Lucas's hunch. The director might be facing issues getting things done from the center administration, or he doesn't trust them. Someone from the center administration might be a spy sent from the Shadow Lotus. Everyone nodded at the possibilities that Riley posited. Plop. Rex slammed down his coffee mug onto the table and said, "Whatever it is, it's a chance for us to visit the West Battle Administration area. I heard the girls are much more fashionable and prettier than what we have here." "You speak as if you were getting any here," Emma said as she rolled her eyes at Rex. Everyone burst out laughing. Lucas was, however, excited to be able to visit the West Battle Administration area. After witnessing the powers that Athena wielded, he was eager to become stronger and be someone like her. The West Battle Administration area, being much more prosperous and powerful, might allow him to earn more slaughter points to level up himself. Chapter 78. Arrival. Center Administration Area, the Leaders' Council Building. The Leaders' Council Building was a building painted in white all over, signifying the purity and righteousness of the leader. It had 5 towers on 4 sides and the center of it, representing the 5 battle administration areas under the leader's rule. Guards in full gear stood on high alert all around. Secretary Hanselman huffed and puffed as he walked up the stairs leading up into the building. His assistant, dressed in a suit, was now drenched in sweat from helping Secretary Hanselman up the long flight of stairs. "Why can't they have an escalator or something?" Secretary Hanselman wiped the sweat off his face as he grumbled. "All thanks to Rodney and the Southern Battle Administration area that I have to come and sweat for them." He wasn't too pleased with what had happened, causing him to have to come to the Leaders' Council to beg for scraps. When he entered the council hall, he was greeted with the other secretaries for the other battle administration areas. And sitting on a high chair was the chairman of the council. Seats for the councilmen were empty as it was an emergency meeting. "Secretary Hanselman, present your case, please." The chairman of the council invited Secretary Hanselman up to the podium to speak. Still wiping his sweat, Secretary Hanselman gestured for his assistant to get ready everything for his speech. When the assistant was done, Secretary Hanselman started speaking. "Here you can see the extent of the damages inflicted upon the wall and the city. Next, there are 657,594 citizens of the Southern Battle Administration area needing food, essentials, and medical care." Slides with pictures and numbers flashed on a screen, and the chairman of the council nodded to the slides and what Secretary Hanselman said. "Stop. I've seen enough." The chairman of the council stopped Secretary Hanselman and narrowed his eyes. "After what you've said, what's in it for us?" "Oh, that. I've already got it planned out for all of us." Secretary Hanselman gave out a hearty laugh and the flesh on his cheeks jiggled. The chairman of the council joined in the laughter, and so did the other secretaries. Southern Battle Administration Area, Nexus Air Base. Lucas and the other team members boarded a plane with their luggage. He was tasked to keep the substance that was in the device, and he kept it inside his dark matter vault armor. The plane looked like the ones that Thorne Blackmore had used to come to their rescue at the wall. It was shaped like a falcon in flight, and the back could open for goods and men to board. They were seated in their seats in a row, and next to them were goods that were to be transported to the West Battle Administration area. This was a flight specially arranged for them by Rodney, and so there wasn't anyone else except for the team on the flight. "Put on the safety belt, we will be taking off soon," the attendant said, and Lucas strapped on the safety belt. The back of the plane hummed and closed. Whoosh! The engines of the plane roared, and Lucas felt the force kicking at his chest, making him lean back onto the back of the seat. Soon, the plane took off and a blue glow started to engulf the body of the plane. "What's that?" Rex pointed at the blue glow and asked. "This?" The attendant pointed at the blue glow and replied, "That's the protective cover for the plane to avoid the demonic beasts in the air." Just as the attendant was saying, Lucas saw a dark shadow in the distance. From the size of the shadow, He figured that it must have been more than twice as large as the plane. Thankfully, the protective cover shielding the plane from detection worked. The demonic beast flew past the plane as if it didn't exist. After half a day's worth of travel, the plane slowly descended. Thud. When the wheels of the plane touched ground, it gave out a loud thud. Lucas felt himself jumping out of the seat from the impact. The seatbelt had done its job. Whirl. The back of the plane whirled and opened again. "Thank you for flying with Southern Airlines." The attendant bowed at Lucas as he alighted from the back of the plane. The other team members followed closely behind. Immediately, Lucas felt the difference. The air was chill, and with every breath he took, the hot air turned into a white mist. "Brr! How do they live in such weather?" Rex exclaimed, and he was glad that he was an awakened. He would be shivering by now if he wasn't one with extra endurance compared to someone who wasn't. "Remember, we are poor folks coming here to seek out refuge from our friend Dr. Uva." Riley reminded them of their cover, and they proceeded to walk towards the airbase terminal. "Humph. I don't see the need for all the extra cautiousness." Rex shrugged as he was already in a sightseeing mood. "I'm so glad the good isn't with you," Emma said as she shook her head. Lucas was new to the team, and he was already so much more dependable than Rex, she thought. Lucas, however, was marveling at the terminal of the airbase. It was brightly lit and had huge glass panels for travelers to observe the planes. It looked like any airport terminal from where he had transmigrated from. A world of difference from the old and dilapidated airbase they had in the Southern Battle Administration area. When they got into the terminal of the airbase, everyone was just as in awe as he was. There was heating in the terminal, the ground was carpeted, and everyone wore fashionable nice clothing. The soldiers at the checkpoint initially turned their noses up at them. Seeing the clothes that they wore and where they were from, the soldiers felt that they were coming here for illegal purposes. "Welcome to the West Battle Administration area." One of the soldiers handed Riley's ID back to him and said. It was the same for Rex, Emma, and Harrianto at the other checkpoints. The soldiers' attitude changed when they saw their classification of SSS level and SS level. With Lucas's ID in his hands, the soldier attending to Lucas frowned when he saw on Lucas's ID. He glanced at Lucas and frowned. Chapter 79. Dr. Uva. The soldier wanted to ask Lucas some questions, but a commotion broke out from behind him. "Look, it's the Blitz team. They are so good-looking." Blasphemy, they are not only good-looking, but also powerful as SSS level awakened. A crowd had gathered following behind an awakened team. Flashes of flashlights from their cameras and phones flickered brightly. The awakened team wore fashionable designer clothes that showcased their muscular bodies for the men and voluptuous bodies for the women. The leader of the team, with a head of short blonde hair, glanced back and the crowd behind him got excited. "What are you doing? Let him through and we might be able to get an autograph from Zach." The soldier next to the one processing Lucas said. "Here you go." The soldier handling Lucas quickly scanned his ID and let Lucas through, after which Lucas saw him close the counter and run after the Blitz team. "And I thought you were popular in the South Battle Administration area," Rex teased Riley and said. Riley shrugged his shoulders and said, "I've never asked for any of the attention. Heard that they worship the awakened like superstars here in the West Battle Administration area. I guess it's true. However, it would be best for us to keep a low profile here. We have a mission to accomplish." Lucas and the other team members nodded. They proceeded to get out of the airbase, and what they saw was more impressive. There were many skyscrapers standing tall far out in the distance. Lights glittered like starlight on the skyscrapers and even in the surroundings. A huge difference from what they were used to. Along the way in the car to the city, Lucas saw huge billboards with different awakened, advertising for different products. Things were certainly different here in the West Battle Administration area. Riley had arranged for a hotel that wasn't near town, and the streets, even though they were lit with street lamps along the way, weren't as glamorous as what they saw in the airbase. It somehow reminded Lucas of his dark and tiny room among the tall and glittering skyscrapers. Fortunately, the room was clean and neat, with all the necessary amenities. After Lucas settled in, Riley popped his head through the door and said, "Rest well tonight. We will go and see Dr. Uva tomorrow." Lucas nodded and he started to unpack. When he was done, he turned on the TV to wind down. Let's welcome Zach from the Blitz team to talk about their latest mission. The man they met at the airbase appeared on the screen. He talked about how they ventured out to kill a demonic beast that was rampaging many awakened. The screen then turned to a video from a live-action camera that was mounted on Zach's body. Lucas leaned forward and watched closely. He frowned when he saw the demonic beast. The Blitz team was surrounding and killing off a fire deer. But the video's edit made it seem like it was a near call, with Zach coming close to being hit by the fireballs unleashed by the fire deer several times. Lucas recalled the crowd at the airbase saying that they were SSS-level awakened, but Zach certainly didn't seem to be one. Either the video was done on purpose to make the fire deer look dangerous or Zach wasn't an SSS-level awakened. When the screen cut back to the studio, the audience gave Zach a round of applause. The host was close to tears thanking Zach's team for protecting the civilians. "Thanks, but it's our duty to do so. I'd also like to take this opportunity to invite others to join my team on a mission and have the chance to shake hands with Peter Lim at his birthday party," Zach said with a bow before the screen cut to a commercial for an automated toothbrush. Lucas felt bewildered at what he had seen. It was surreal to him, especially after fighting against the numerous demonic beasts on top of the wall and the underground base. With that thought, he went to sleep, preparing himself for the next day. Next day, after they'd finished breakfast, Riley picked up his phone to give Dr. Uva a call. Ring. The call rang and his expression changed after a while, when the phone wasn't picked up. When the call ended, Riley tried again. But he got the same result. Maybe he is busy or something. We'll try and see if he is in his office. Lucas and the other team members then took a taxi to where Dr. Uva was working. The office was in one of the largest research centers. It was heavily guarded with fully armed guards and workers were busy clearing off some graffiti on the walls when they arrived. Lucas took note of what the graffiti said. "Devils, get out of here. Perish in hell, you demons. The demonic beasts are saviors sent by the Divine One." There seemed to be someone protesting the research that was going on. They passed through the security with their IDs and as awakened, their entrance to Dr. Yui's office was relatively smooth. However, Dr. Uva wasn't in his office. "Dr. Uva isn't here today. It's unusual for him not to notify me, but he might have gotten too sick." His assistant told them that Dr. Uva was away, but he didn't know where Dr. Uva might be. Lucas frowned when he heard the assistant. Something might be up. "Where is Dr. Uva staying? We can go and visit to check if he is all right," he said, and the assistant hesitated for a moment. Riley chimed in and said, "Don't worry. We are here representing Dr. Yui's close friend." He showed his phone with a picture of Rodney with Dr. Uva, and then a picture of the team with Rodney. "All right, let me write it down for you." The pictures convinced the assistant, and he took out a pen and paper to write Dr. Yui's address onto the paper. Dr. Yui's home, which was in one of the posh areas in the city, stood alone among lustful green lawn within steel fences. The mansion was huge, standing tall with 3 stories and with a swimming pool out in the front yard. Riley rang the doorbell and waited, but there was no response. Lucas walked around to see if he could spot anyone in the house. He couldn't. When he saw the water in the swimming pool, he raised one of his hands and pointed at the water with the other. Riley and the others looked over. There was a smudge of dark crimson in the water. Chapter 80, Flames of Divinity. Riley whispered to Lucas and the others, "Get into formation." Lucas and the other teammates nodded. Now that Lucas could unleash so many lightning strikes in a short span of time, he took the lead. Rex followed behind, ready to protect Lucas with his stone wall at any moment. And behind Rex were Riley and Emma. Last of all was Harrianto. They leaped over the fence and landed on the lawn of the front yard. Slowly, they got to the mansion. Lucas peered through the window and saw that the interior was in a mess. Items were strewn around on the sofa. A broken chair lay on the ground and the TV screen was broken. A fight might have broken out. Creak. He pushed the front door and was surprised that it was open. Lucas entered through the front door, and he heard footsteps running from the second floor. Up there, he said and gave chase immediately. When he climbed up the flight of stairs, just before reaching the second floor, a toy monkey stood in the middle of the hallway. A flicker of bright light appeared in Lucas's hands as he got ready. The toy monkey suddenly moved and smashed the cymbals it had in its hands. Clash. The cymbals gave out a clashing sound. Lucas felt his eardrums breaking as the sound wave from the cymbals traveled to his ears. It startled him for a moment, but his SSS-level physique immediately did its work and healed his eardrums. Arg! Damn it! Rex, who was behind Lucas, wasn't as lucky. The sound wave caused Rex's ears to bleed, and he quickly covered his ears. The toy monkey pulled its hands back, and before it could smash the cymbals together again, Lucas unleashed a lightning strike at it. Boom! The lightning strike landed and blew the toy monkey into pieces. He quickly ran up the remaining flight of stairs. A figure at the other end of the hallway slipped into one of the rooms. Lucas glanced back and shouted, "He is going to jump out of the window! Stop him!" Harrianto, Emma, and Riley turned around and ran out of the building, hoping to catch the man trying to run away. Lucas wanted to turn around and give chase too, but he heard footsteps in one of the rooms. The person must have thought that his ears must have been hurt from the toy monkey's cymbals and couldn't hear the footsteps. He motioned for Rex to keep silent and follow him. Rex gritted his teeth and nodded his head. He would give that bastard a good one for hurting his ears. Rex thought silently as he stared at the room that Lucas was approaching. Lucas crept outside the door and peered inside. A man was rummaging through some drawers hurriedly. He must be looking for something, Lucas thought. The man suddenly froze, and his hands stopped in midair. "What the hell?" the man exclaimed and turned his head back towards the door. Lucas had used his shadow to grab onto the shadow of the man's hands. "Who are you?" the man shouted and tried to break free. He was confident of his strength with S-level ability. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move. He glanced at Lucas's young face, and he didn't know what to make of it. "I have the same question for you," Lucas said as he walked towards the man. Tot, tot. Out from the bottom of the bed, toy soldiers appeared and shot their weapons at Lucas. Lucas's dark matter vault armor hardened and blocked off the attacks from the toy soldiers. Virum. A toy plane came swooping down at Lucas from the shelf. It dropped a bomb towards his face. Boom! The bomb caused a small explosion. The man smirked and expected Lucas to cry out in pain. But to his astonishment, none of it happened. Lucas's skin was only reddened from the explosion. It was nothing he had seen before. His toy soldiers' attacks could inflict wounds on even mid-tiered demonic beasts and SS level awakened. How was this young man able to take the hit and be unscathed? However, he didn't have time to figure out the answer, as Lucas raised his hands and a flicker of bright lights blinded him. Wham! It was Lucas's turn to strike back, and he unleashed a lightning strike at the man. The man could smell his skin charring and felt his flesh being cooked by the lightning strike. His eyes closed and he lost consciousness immediately. The toy soldiers dropped onto the ground lifelessly, like the dead toys they were supposed to be. Lucas had unleashed enough of his lightning strike to knock out the man, but not enough to kill him. He needed him alive for information about the whereabouts of Dr. Uva. "I see that you are also done here." Riley entered the room with a man held in his hand. Emma and Harrianto followed behind. Their hunt for the other man was also successful. Lucas noticed that the man held by Riley wore a necklace with a pendant that was in the form of a flame. He went over and saw that the other man wore a similar necklace. They must have been from the same organization, he thought. Rex tied the two of them up, and when the time was right, he gave them a smack on the face so hard that it knocked out a tooth from their mouths. "Let us go. Why are you aiding the devils?" The man hit with Lucas's lightning strike said as he shook his head, trying to get himself out of the grogginess. "We are not interested in your fight with the devils. We just want to know where you have taken Dr. Uva." Lucas said as he conjured up flickers of lightning in his hands. The man, after being hit by the lightning strike, shivered as the thought of being fried alive with it went through his mind. Dr.
Uwe?
We didn't even touch him. He was already gone when we arrived. The man said as he tried to get away from Lucas. It wasn't you?